The Legend of Zorro, 2005. What were some of the other titles considered for The Legend of Zorro? What did child actor Adrian Alonso have to overcome to play Joaquin de la Vega, son of Don Alejandro and Elena? What's one example of a reshoot did Martin Campbell, the director, have to do to make sure that the film got that coveted PG rating from the MPAA? These and more questions will be answered on
Back Look Cinema, the podcast.
Count Armand, with his fancy wine and his frou-frou accent. How can Elena choose a man like that? I'll make her want me back so badly, she'll be weeping with desire. Nobody leaves my tequila worm dangling in the wind. Hello, my name is Zoe. It's spelled Z-O or Z to the O for those of you outside of the U.S. Welcome back, friends. This is the 221st episode of Back Look Cinema, the podcast, where we take a look back at the movies of yesteryear, especially the movies of the latter half of the last millennium. If you like what you're about to hear, then please tell your family, tell your friends. And if you've lost a loved one, the love of your life, then man up or woman up and do the work to get them back and tell them about Backlook Cinema. Another original adventure of Zorro that was filled with action and humor, if not a little more campy than the previous movie. Antonio Banderas does his own stunts like he did in the last movie, and Catherine Zeta-Jones literally gets more into the action. And in spite of the villains being basically cartoon characters, I really enjoyed this movie. So let us jump right into it with the opening credits. Elena de Vega is at a crossroads. Her marriage to the love of her life isn't going as she imagined. The man she married seemed to spend more time at work than he does with her or their son. Their differences seem irreconcilable, and they separated and divorced. She is soon courted by an old friend from Spain, Count Armand, a suave, cultured, and sophisticated gentleman. But this courtship is not as it appears to be. Elena soon finds herself engaged in the same kind of work that she criticized her husband for. Is this what it was like for her husband, skulking around under the cover of darkness like some nocturnal fox? Was this what it was like to live in the shadow of the Legend of Zorro? The Legend of Zorro was released October 28, 2005, produced by Columbia Pictures, Tornado Productions Incorporated, and Amblin Entertainment. It grossed over $46 million in the US and Canada and over $142 million worldwide on a reported budget of $75 million. Now, let's put that into the context of adjusting it for inflation and kind of comparing it to the previous film, The Mask of Zorro. Whereas the previous film, The Mask of Zorro, did $190 million in the US and Canada, this film did $77 million. And where The Mask of Zorro pulled in $506 million worldwide, this film pulled in $240 million. This is all adjusted for inflation. And then when you consider the budget for the previous film was $192 million, while this film was budgeted as $125. Even when you adjust it for inflation, they actually spent less money on this movie and they got far less returns. But this isn't because of the budget. It's because, unfortunately, people didn't vibe with it that much. They didn't cotton to The Legend of Zorro the same way they loved The Mask of Zorro. They had far less return. It's not a flop per se. It just perform far less than the previous film. And that's sad because I really like the film, but at the same time, I can understand the criticisms that this film might get. So let's get into who was starring in the film. We'll start off with the two returning actors. I won't go into some of the other things that they've done. I covered some of that in the previous episode. So if you want to check out some examples of their work, go check out the previous episode. So the two returning stars are Antonio Banderas, who plays Alejandro de la Vega, formerly Alejandro Murray, also known as Zorro, and Catherine Zeta-Jones, playing Elena de la Vega, formerly Elena Montero. As for the new actors coming into this film, we'll have Rufus Sewell, playing Count Armand. He's also been in A Knight's Tale, Hercules from 2014, and Abraham Lincoln, Vampire Hunter. Raul Mendez playing Feroc. You might have seen him in Isla Oculta, 90 Minutes, or Narcos. I think all of these are TV shows. He hasn't been in many movies. He's more of a TV guy. Lots of Spanish language television. Nick Chunlin plays Jacob McGivens. You might have seen him in The Chronicles of Riddick, Con Air, or Training Day. He's a gruff individual, and he's used to playing gruff characters. Adrian Alonso plays Joaquin de la Vega, and you might have seen him in Casi Divas or Under the Same Moon. Also played more in television than he has in the movies. Michael Emerson plays Harrison, or Harrigan, and you might have seen him in Saw, or you're probably more familiar with him on Lost, the TV show. And then I have Shuler Hensley. He played Pike, and you might have seen him in Van Helsing or The Greatest Showman. Like the previous film, this film was directed by Martin Campbell. And if you want to see some examples of his work, just check out my previous episode. And I have talked a little bit about some of the things that he's done. It's written by Roberto Orca and Alex Kuzman, also from the original film, Ted Elliott and Terry Russo. Or is it Rossio? I'm not exactly sure. Anyway, as usual, or as always, Johnston McCulley created Zorro. I don't know why he's not actually credited in this film like he was in the original film. But Roberto Orca and Alex Kuzman, they at one time were a writing team, writing and producing a bunch of stuff together. They probably still do. I'm used to seeing those names associated with each other. And they've written things like The Amazing Spider-Man 2, Star Trek from 2009, Transformers, Michael Bay's first movie, or his first Transformers movie, Mission Impossible 3, and they're both in a lot of TV. Orca went on to, I guess, write and produce Hawaii Five-0, and Kuzman has been heavily involved, is basically the brainchild and the showrunner, the presiding figure over all of the new Star Trek TV shows that have been out. It's not quite over yet. There are still a couple more series that are finishing up, but he is responsible for the new Trek, as some people call it. And then the original writers, Ted Elliott and Terry Rossio, I was wondering what their contributions to this new script was, because the producers had reached out to this writing team to get them to write a sequel, because they really wanted a sequel to the first movie. And doing my research, I found this article on boxofficeprofits.com, and an article titled "What Went Wrong? The Legend of Zorro," and I'll leave a link for that in the description. And basically they were saying that the original script included pirates, the California Gold Rush, Elena dressed as Zorro, and an old flame from Elena's past, and someone from Alejandro's past. And this script was dropped in favor of the Orca Kuzman treatment that had Alejandro and Elena separating and getting a divorce, but enough elements of Elliot and Rossio's script remained for them to get a story credit. And I think that has to do with basically Alana as an action figure, as a more involved in the intrigue. It's like she's doing Zorro stuff, but she's not dressed as Zorro. And then the element of her running into somebody from her past, and that's a big part of the story in this movie. The music was composed by James Horner, a fantastic composer. The music is beautiful. The music in this film is pretty much the music from the previous film. Is just some reworking, some newer themes, and some reworking of older themes. And you could check out what some of the other works that he's been involved in, just like the other, like I've noted earlier, just check out the previous episode. And that's it for the opening credits. I have just a small announcement. I had a wonderful note sent to me from the YouTube channel, and it was from @MarkCrespo-M2C, reoccurring letter writer, and I appreciate their comments. And they wrote, "Wonderful movie commentary, guys. Thanks. 2 thumbs up." Thank you @MarkCrespo-M2C. I really appreciate your comment, and thank you for listening. I'm hoping that there are others out there like you that are enjoying the work and that they're learning some things about these movies that they had not known before. And if you want to leave a comment, you can do like @MarkCrespo-M2C and leave a comment on YouTube, or you can leave a comment on email, or you can leave a comment on one of the social medias, and I'll leave that information at the end of the episode, or you could check out the show notes. And now let's move on to our favorite parts. So the themes of this movie are slightly different. They still deal with family, and this is more of kind of priorities. And in this movie, there's a heavy theme of prioritizing family over work, strangely enough, having a good work-life balance. And it deals with neglect, love, and forgiveness. It's very much kind of like a family movie, but a family movie in a sense that the family members are all action heroes. It kind of reminds me of like Spy Kids, or almost like the Fantastic Four, a family that is engaging in action scenarios, trying to solve problems that are plaguing society. But in this, the dynamic is slightly different. Whereas in Spy Kids or the Fantastic Four, everybody's working as a team, and, you know, everybody like rehearses and practices and they're able to have like a combat scenario as a team. With the De La Vega family, they're all acting on their own. They're not acting as a team. So all of them see disparate things that are going wrong with whatever section of society that they're dealing with. And they kind of converge on this one thing. And so they all happen to be working, like if they were a family of detectives, they think that they're working separate cases, but they realize that they're all working on the same case. And none of them know that the other family member is acting in this manner. Zorro's identity is secret from his son. So his son doesn't know that his father goes out in disguise solving people's problems as Zorro. The son, Shaquin, is rambunctious. He's naughty. He's incorrigible, as the adults might say. And he just like goes out and gets into trouble. He's not really paying attention in class. He causes trouble for his teacher. And he's kind of a nuisance. And because of his nature, he'll see stuff that he thinks is wrong or suspicious, and he'll get involved. So he kind of, just because of the nature of him being kind of a knucklehead, he accidentally gets involved into serious matters. And then Elena is kind of duped into participating into some spy craft, and she doesn't realize, and like Alejandro or Zorro doesn't know that Elena is engaged in the spy craft, spying on people. Alejandro doesn't know the type of trouble that his son be getting into. His son doesn't know that Alejandro is Zorro. His son doesn't know, or their son doesn't know that Elena gets involved in this weird spy craft. And Elena doesn't know how much trouble that the son gets into. So it's kind of, that is the dynamic. They're all working, but they're not working together as a family. And they eventually get that way at the end of the film when the separate things that they actually having an adventure on, these separate things converge into one central point. And the central point is basically they're all realize that they're fighting the same villain. This film opens up in 1815 California, where people are voting. The people of California are voting whether or not they should be a state of the United States. And it's interesting because many of the people, they're very much in favor of becoming a state. Zorro, or Alejandro de la Vega himself, is in favor of California becoming a state. And this is kind of confusing. The movie's rationale is that the people believe that joining the United States would mean an end to exploiting poor people. They believe that there's a promise of freedom by joining the Union. So they enthusiastically vote to become a state. And this is in their small town. There are other towns and counties that are voting on the same proposition. But this mainly deals with the town of San Montero, where Zorro is based. Basically, for some weird reason, the vote for statehood is under threat. And then Zorro shows up. Somehow Zorro kind of knows that people, because this is a situation where this is election day and people are voting and putting in their ballots and so on and so forth. And for some reason, the ballots are under threat. And Zorro shows up undercover. Like he's wearing, it's basically Alejandro, he's wearing his Zorro garb, but he's also wearing a robe over that so people don't know that he's there kind of overseeing the events. And it kind of mirrors the first scene of the previous film where you had Diego de la Vega also kind of skulking around the beginning of the movie, where you had a large crowd and the governor is about to execute some men, and Zorro is there to stop the execution of the men in the first movie. In this movie, Zorro is there to secure the election. He's providing election security. There are some soldiers there, but it doesn't seem like they're much help. But at least they're not opposed to Zorro. It's like they're not confrontational with Zorro when Zorro finally appears. But the thing is that the people believe that they won't be exploited, or at least they believe that there is a less opportunity for them to be exploited by rich people, and that there'll be more opportunity for freedom. And looking at this movie in today's political climate, it seems that people are still being exploited even today. Like them believing that they can live in a place where they won't be exploited. It seems like the faith in that happening it feels like it's been misplaced, especially seeing what's happening today. Even at the end of this movie, Zorro is still needed. He's still needed to help people to deal with injustice and oppression. Because the whole theme of the movie is like, well, one of the themes of the movie that I had missed out on is like, is Zorro needed? Like, since California will become a state, then that would mean that there's a less chance for injustice, there's a less chance for corruption or oppression or things that people would need Zorro for. So there shouldn't be a need for Zorro if California becomes a part of the United States. And Elena is frustrated with Alejandro because she wants him to basically give up being Zorro. She wants him to retire the mask and return home and be present for their son and for herself. And Alejandro, he is resistant to leaving behind, even though he has made promises that he's going to retire Zorro. He is resistant to that idea because he feels that there'll always be a need for Zorro. And then even at the end of the movie, California becomes a state. Spoiler alert. But even then, after California becomes a state, if people still call on him, like he's still needed. There's a thing in a movie where instead of the bat signal, the people ring a church bell. They ring the church bell 5 times, meaning that they need Zorro's assistance. So at the end of the movie, the church bell chimes off 5 times, and he goes riding off into the sunset to help the people, to defend them against oppression and injustice. So it would seem that Zorro is still needed. I feel like we need Zorro today. Because the work of Zorro still isn't done. So once again, I love the action in this movie like I did in the last movie. Although I have to point out that the action in this movie is a little bit more fantastic. And what I mean by fantastic, I mean it's less believable or less realistic, but only slightly. Like, does Zorro really have to flip that much? Does he really have to do that many somersaults, right? And so it's made to be more spectacular, but I still enjoyed it, although it did seem a little bit much at times. So you get a lot of the action sequence. The beginning of the movie has this fantastic action sequence where Zorro is trying to, like, some bandits show up to steal the ballot box, and Zorro has to steal a ballot box back from the bandit. And the funny thing is that they're either soldiers or police officers. I can't really tell. I guess they're soldiers, and the soldiers are not as helpful as you would think. They're there to presumably secure the election, but these bandits show up, and their security is or the soldier, the security that is set up by the soldier is ill-equipped to deal with these bandits. It's almost like they weren't expecting the bandits, so they didn't arrange the security of the ballots so that they could deal with any potential situation where some bandits might show up and steal the ballot box. So they're not as useful. And then Zorro shows up, and then there's, the huge action sequence. But, you gotta suspend some disbelief for a little bit, because the way the bandit shows up is that the main bandit comes, and then his partners show up, and the partners are surrounding the village. All the villagers are in basically the middle of this square where they're doing the voting. So you got a bunch of innocent people that are in the middle, and then you've got the soldiers or police officers. They're also in the middle amongst the people, and the bandits are all on the outside. And essentially they're holding the people hostage, and the threat is like they'll start shooting people if the people don't hand over the ballot box. And so they do. But then Zorro jumps into action and starts fighting the bandits. But this doesn't make any sense because the people are still under threat. Like, in a different situation, if anybody jumps into action, then these bandits would just start shooting people. And so this is not the Mexican standoff that you need it to be. But Zorro steps into the action, and then the bad guys immediately forget about the people that they're holding hostages, and they start focusing on Zorro, either trying to shoot him, trying to stab him, trying to fight him, trying to deal with him. And that kind of doesn't make any sense, because they have the hostages, and really the bandits should just start shooting hostages to keep Zorro from attacking them. I think in a different movie, or if it was written a little bit differently, then the bandits would have gotten away, and then Zorro would have followed them and basically run them down while they were trying to escape, and he would have gotten the ballot box that way. And that's eventually what happens. Like the bandits, even though they're fighting in the square in the city, the bandits do get away with the ballot box, and Zorro has to chase them down. But since the bandits had hostages, they could have just shot the hostages. But that's not how the movie was written. And then the soldiers are nowhere in sight. Like Zorro is chasing the bad guys, the bandits with the ballot box, but the soldiers aren't. So that's kind of weird. I feel like there should have been some soldiers there as Zorro's backup. That being said, I love the fighting choreography in this movie. The fights are fantastic. Everybody looks good when they're fighting. I think I mentioned the theme. I love the theme. And it's, like I said, it's a reworking of the original theme, but it's such a good theme, right? It's hard to say anything bad about that theme. It is so good. Some people even say that this theme saves the movie. Another thing that I really like is there's tension between Alejandro and Elena, because of what I mentioned earlier. Elena thinks that Alejandro should stop being Zorro, and Alejandro doesn't want to stop. It's like he says the people need Zorro, and Elena says, no, you need Zorro. And another thing that you'll notice is that their names are de la Vega in the film. So Alejandro de la Vega and Elena de la Vega and her son, Joaquin de la Vega. Joaquin obviously named after Alejandro's brother. And I'll get into that a little bit in the trivia, but I figured that shouldn't be their name. But that is their names in this movie. So I guess we got to go with that. And I understand why they did it. They want to carry on the legacy of Zorro. So the identity of Zorro classically is Diego de la Vega. So in this film, in a way, they're carrying on the legend of Zorro. They're carrying on the name of de la Vega. So I believe that's why they kept it. But I love that tension between Alejandro and Elena. I like the chemistry they have, their combativeness. It's like they have mastered a way of having that fight where you're still in love with that person, but you have to fight with them anyway, because you feel like you're being pulled in different directions, like in directions that you don't want to be pulled in. And that was amazing to see on screen, that chemistry between Antonio Banderas and Catherine Zeta-Jones. It's just nice to see. So they're fighting, they get a divorce. In the midst of all this, you have their son. I'm not exactly sure how old he is. Joaquin looks like he's between 8 and 12 years old. He's in primary school, and he's just a troublemaker. He's just causing trouble. He's fighting with his teacher with a ruler and a kind of mock sword fight. He has a slingshot, and he's constantly slinging rocks at people. He's just a nuisance. He's a problem. He's a problem child. He's a bad student. It's amazing that he's learning anything in that school. It's amazing that his teacher hasn't beat him with a stick. He's just that kind of kid. He's not a bully. Like, he doesn't bully the other kids. He's like a kid with ADHD, I think. He's that kid. He's that kid in the school when the teacher tells everybody to be quiet, but you got this one kid in the corner that will not stop talking. It's like, okay, everybody be quiet, and then when you be quiet, you'll get a piece of candy. But there's one kid who will not let anybody get a piece of candy because they just cannot stop talking even for a minute. That's who Joaquin is. He's that kid. Like, if you're a good kid in school, Joaquin was that kid that bothered you because he was such a bad kid. And this kind of sets up the tension between Alejandro and Joaquin, because Joaquin is he thinks of himself as a kid of action, and he's always getting into stuff that he ain't got no business getting into. By contrast, he perceives his father to be a kind of a pacifist. Like, he witnessed his father being bullied by this other guy. This like, one of the main bad guys is Jacob McGivens, and he's basically a gang leader. So he has his own little gang, and he goes around bullying people, and he bullies Alejandro in public, basically humiliating him. And because Alejandro has to put on this facade as a don, a gentleman, and as a pacifist, he has to allow himself to get bullied. He can't, he puts on this facade because he doesn't want people to know that he's Zorro. And I think common knowledge is that among the people is that Zorro is a peasant. His identity was revealed in the previous film. They don't know what his name is, but they know that he's not a nobleman. They think that he's a peasant, I think. And in this movie, that's what Jacob thinks Zorro is. So he has no idea that Zorro might be a nobleman. So Alejandro has to put on this act. He gets slapped around, and the son is ashamed of him because the son is, like I said, is a kid of action, and he sees his father getting bullied, and it sucks for him because he doesn't. It's bad enough that his father works too much and doesn't spend time with him. And it's quite another thing. He thinks his father is out doing stuff that Dons do, like meeting with other Dons, deciding policy for the people who live in California, that sort of thing. He doesn't know that his father's going out being Zorro and doing action stuff. For Zorro he's a hero for Jacqueline, but his father's kind of a simp. So Zorro is kind of, not Zorro, but Jacqueline is kind of upset like that. He's upset that his father's kind of being like a punk, just being bullied. So that is that tension between Alejandro and Jacqueline. So Alejandro and Elena, they fight, they break up. I think Elena files for divorce. I'm not exactly sure how she's just able to do this. Alejandro is chilling in the public bathhouse, and he gets a notice that Elena is divorcing him. And I'm only saying that because, I'm not exactly sure if there was no fault divorce in Mexico or women could just file for divorce. I didn't actually dig through the historical records if women were allowed to do that. But that's aside the point. So Alejandro is living in a hotel. And meanwhile, while that happens, you have Elena, and Elena has this fantastic fight sequence. It's she's being followed by some dudes, and she don't know who these dudes are, just some gringos. And these gringos kind of corner her in an alley, and then she starts fighting them with improv fighting, with hoes and swords, and not swords, but sticks and whatever she can find. And it's like I say, it's a great action sequence. But they eventually get the drop on her, and they're following her because they want her to be a spy. And they basically blackmail her because they know that Alejandro is Zorro. They had found out early in the movie that the true identity of Zorro. So they use this information to blackmail her into working for the government. These men represent the Pinkertons, and the Pinkertons were the bad guys of the day. There are not a lot of great things to be said about the Pinkertons in the 1800s. So the Pinkertons want her to do this investigation because since California is not fully a state, they're not exactly allowed to act. They're basically blackmailing her to act in their stead. And then later we're introduced to Armand, or Count Armand. Alejandro de la Vega is encouraged to go to this party thrown on by this Count. Count Armand has his vineyard, and he's welcoming everybody, and he's promising to do good things for California. He's fresh off from Spain. And it's at this party that Alejandro finds out that Armand and Elena, his ex, are dating, and it's a cause for a bunch of fun, awkward moments, a little bit campy. Alejandro gets very drunk, and it's he's very combative with Armand, obviously because Armand is dating his wife or his ex-wife. And then Alejandro and Elena, they kind of get into this dance at the party where they're kind of arguing and dancing at the same time, but it's like Alejandro is like drunk arguing the way drunk people argue because he had drank a lot of, he got upset and he just started drinking a lot. And then like by the end, he realizes that he's kind of like being a fool and he wants to win back Elena, but he can't do it the way he's doing it at that party. So he politely leaves the party. And that was a great sequence. That was a great scene. So it's like one of my favorite scenes in the movie is that confrontation that Alejandro has with Elena. It's a scene that you can find on YouTube, but it's the drunk party banter was delightful. There's also a bunch of moments with that Alejandro has with his horse, and that's when it kind of gets into some camp territory. So there is the time when he caught Tornado drinking. He named his horse the same as the previous horse. So he caught his horse drinking, I guess, tequila. And then there was that time that his horse was smoking a pipe. And then there was a time where the horse's eyes popped wide open when the horse saw a tunnel when he and Zorro were on top of a train. So the horse is kind of engaged in some goofy stuff, a little bit campy, but it's fine. It doesn't derail the movie for me, but there were a lot of campy horse moments. Oh, also that time when the horse, Zorro was trying to tell his horse to go, but he was telling his horse in English, and then he had to switch to Spanish, and the horse went. And, Zorro quipped that he would have to work on the horse's English. And the thing with like dogs and horses and stuff, like if you train them in one language, then they're only going to understand that one language, right? I don't think you can just arbitrarily switch language. I don't think that they're all of a sudden going to become bilingual. Alejandro wanders outside of the Count's manor or mansion or whatever you call it, big house. He's like outside of the walls, and then while he's wandering outside the walls and kind of complaining to his horse about his relationship with Elena, the horse runs off. And then after the horse runs off, there's this huge explosion. Since it's at Count Armand's house, he thinks that Count Armand is up to something, like this huge, gigantic explosion that leaves a massive crater. Count Armand has something to do with that. So he thinks that he needs to investigate it as Zorro. Alejandro and Armand meet again. They end up on Armand's property, and they are going to have a friendly polo match. And this is also one of my favorite parts because they're supposed to be playing polo. It's like one-on-one polo, but they're charging each other like it's a jousting match. Like they take their polo mallets and they charge each other like they're jousting, and they're knocking each other off horses with the jousting mallets, or not the jousting mallets, but the polo mallets. And at some point, the Armand, his polo mallet breaks, or he has his butler break it so that there's a sharp point on the end, and then he's going to charge at Zorro with the sharp end and try to stab him. But at the same time, Elena, because Elena is there at this, because this isn't really a match. This is like two men kind of brawling with each other. Elena loosens the saddle on Zorro's horse. So as the horses approach, Alejandro falls off his horse and Armand misses, so he doesn't get to impale Alejandro. What Alejandro doesn't realize is that the reason that Elena is with Armand is because she's investigating Armand for the U.S. government. She is, when she's in his house, she's snooping around. She's looking for evidence that he's engaged in wrongdoing. She's trying to figure out why somebody's trying to steal ballots, or why these ruffians that, like the same gang leader that was bullying Alejandro, is also basically forcibly taking property from village people. So she's trying to figure out what the connection is with all of this. Alejandro is also trying to find connection of all of this. And then there's some contrived writing in this film, because the same bully that bullied Alejandro kind of shows up at a field trip that Joaquin de la Vega and his class are on. Let's just say he's very aggressive towards the school teacher. Like, he's not exactly bullying the school teacher, but he's being somewhat disrespectful to the school teacher. And then after they leave the school teacher and the kids alone, they start to go on, get on their horses, and they got like carts and stuff with their horses, and they're going to ride off. And Joaquin, he decides that he wants to take a ride under their cart and see what these guys are up to. But the thing is, there's no real reason for him to do that. Like, yeah, the dude's a bully. He saw this dude bullying his father, but why does he want to jump on their cart and go where they're going? It's like, how is he going to get back home? What would happen to him if he's discovered? Like, it's a little bit contrived. And that's exactly what happened. He does get into trouble. They do find out, and they are going to try to kill him or kidnap him, and he's rescued by Zorro. And Zorro comes in, and has this fantastic action sequence with the bad guys, and he saves his son. And then after he saves his son, there's a thing where, like, Alejandro knows his son knows him. Like, he can't just have a conversation in a Zorro mask with Joaquin. That won't work. So he starts to speak to Joaquin in Spanish. Like, he's just full on Spanish. And Joaquin asks Zorro, why are you speaking Spanish? And Zorro says, oh, I speak the language of our fathers, right? And he's speaking Spanish in order to further disguise himself from Joaquin, because Joaquin would figure out in a heartbeat if Zorro would just start talking like his father. So that was a funny moment. I really liked that. And it turns out that the bad guys were carrying a bunch of soap, a bunch of bar soap, and now they got to figure out, why are the bad guys carrying a bunch of bar soap, like hundreds of bars of soap? That doesn't seem to make a whole bunch of sense. The Pinkerton guys, they kind of see what Alejandro's doing, and they decide that he's interfering too much. So the Pinkertons are able to ambush Alejandro, and they put him in jail to keep him from interfering, mainly with Elena and her investigation. And they reveal, yeah, we know who you are. We got your wife working for us. And the whole thing with the divorce and everything, that was all fake. We set that up. Like, she really did want to separate from Alejandro, but she didn't want to divorce him. And the Pinkertons, I think they use that as an opportunity to force her to divorce her husband so that she can confidently and believably get close to Count Armand. And so the Pinkerton put in jail. And then Joaquin is like still skulking around. So he finds his father in jail, and he breaks his father out of jail. And in the breakout, his father does a little bit of really good fighting. And his son is like amazed, like, cause remember earlier he saw his father get bullied, and now he sees his father doing some very impressive fighting. And then Alejandro had to say, well, prison changes you, right? Alejandro was in jail by himself, but somehow prison changed him to this master swordsman. So now that Alejandro is free, he's free to investigate. Armand and Elena is doing the same thing, and they end up running into each other at his house. And this was another fantastic scene where they realize they're basically on the same investigation, but Alejandro, as Zorro, he's still jealous of what his wife is doing because he doesn't realize that she's investigating him. And she's trying to convince him that she is, but it's like they're arguing, they're having problems communicating. And then Armand comes, Zorro has to hide. So it's a little bit unresolved, but they kind of know that they're working on the same case. This same mystery that they're both trying to solve. And then we finally found out that there is a secret society that Armand is a part of called the Knights of Aragon or Aragon. I'm not exactly sure how to pronounce that. Aragon. That might be the pronunciation. At any rate, it is, I found out that Aragon is a semi-autonomous region in Spain. And these Knights of Aragon are supposed to be, they're like the Illuminati. They secretly ruled Europe for hundreds of years, and they are fearful of what the United States might become. So they want to disrupt the Union of the United States. At first, they're trying to prevent California from becoming a state. And then they want to encourage the Civil War. You already have this Confederate general kind of haunting the parts of the film. It's like he's just coming around talking about how they don't really like California becoming a state and how they might have to start a civil war. And so he's not a Confederate yet. The South hasn't succeeded yet, but this general is loyal to the South, and he's talking about that. You could tell by his language that the South and the North might have to go to war. And so they're teaming up with Armand to try to bring that about. That's what this secret society is about. They have invented nitroglycerin, and it's like 13 times the power of dynamite. And they want to use this to give to the Southern commander, and he could take it back to the Southern states, and they would use this brand new, highly effective, very powerful explosive to basically use it to their advantage in the war that they intend to start. So that is the plan. The vineyard that they had the party at, the vineyard was basically a cover for the production of nitroglycerin. And at first I was wondering why they would do this, because they eventually start to hide the nitroglycerin in wine bottles. And I was like, well, why would they do that? Because nobody knows what nitroglycerin is. There's no need to hide it in wine bottles. But then I realized that it's the production that they're trying to hide. They're not, like, once it's produced, they want to transport it in wine bottles so that people don't know that they're not producing wine, they're producing explosive. Because before I was like, there's no such thing as nitroglycerin at that time. They invented it. Nobody knows what it is. So there's no need to hide it in wine bottles. But what they want to hide is the production of this stuff. So they got all of this soap, and I guess they're extracting the glycerin from soap and altering it to nitroglycerin. There's also a part that was a little bit confusing. The bandits are sent to find Zorro, so they go straight to the Padre, and they ask the Padre where Zorro's at. And this is confusing because why would they assume that the Padre knows Zorro? It might be because whenever the people need Zorro, they ring the church bell. So that might be the reason why. Because when I was watching the film, I was like, why would they go to the Padre? But maybe that's the reason why. I guess it's common knowledge. Like, everybody knows that the Padre knows Zorro. Or maybe it's that, well, if you had any sense, you would know that the Padre knows Zorro because of the church bells to call Zorro in the first place. But the bad guys, this is the main bad guys. This is Jacob McGivens again. He's the one that's asking the priest about Zorro. So a scuffle ensues. He shoots the priest, and then he kidnaps Joaquin. Everybody ends up at the nitroglycerin factory, and Zorro is captured, and he's unmasked. And he's unmasked in front of Jacqueline and Elena. Elena already knows. So she's just, by this time, she's been found out. The Pinkerton agents have been murdered. She's found out by Armand that she doesn't like him, and she's been spying on him for the whole time. And so she's captured. Jacqueline is captured. Zorro is captured, and he's unmasked, and his son is surprised, and now he's proud of his father because his father is Zorro. Zorro is his hero, but it's kind of a messed up situation where this is how he finds out. Like bad things are about to happen to him, his mother, and his father. But at least at this moment, that's when he finds out that his father is Zorro. And they were going to kill Zorro, but it was like, we're not in front of the baby, right? Let's not murder the father right in front of the baby. So Armand takes Elena and Jacqueline, and they're onto the train. It's supposed to take them to someplace away from the city where they're going to meet up with not the Confederate. He's going to meet up with the South commander. I forgot what state that he was a general for, but he's going to meet with the Southern general, and he's going to pass off the train of nitroglycerin, either the train, or he's just going to pass the nitroglycerin to the men, to those soldiers, and I guess collect his money. I don't know what how the whole deal goes, but he's going to pass his nitroglycerin off to these Southern generals. So meanwhile, back at so when the train takes off, still had Alejandro unmasked, and he's waiting for like the bad guys to kill him. And the bad guys, they can't just stab you or shoot you. They gotta mouth off a little bit. And so while this is going on, the priest comes and he rescues Zorro. He's able to, and then the Zorro and the priest, they're fighting the bad guys, and the main bad guy, Jacob McGivens, he ends up getting blowed up because they're fighting at the nitroglycerin factory. So while they're fighting, Jacob gets hemmed up on some machinery, and he finds himself under this vessel. It's like a piece of equipment that's dropping nitroglycerin. I guess it's supposed to be dropping nitroglycerin into a pool. I'm not exactly sure what's going on, but it's dropping drops of nitroglycerin, and McGovern finds himself under the contraption as it's about to drop another drop of nitroglycerin. And because the nitroglycerin doesn't have a safe place to land, it lands on Jacob McGovern's forehead, and he explodes. It causes a massive explosion. And then after that, because this is a factory, the whole factory should have exploded, but I don't think that happens. At any rate, Zorro is saved, and he goes off to try to stop the train. And so there's this is like the end sequence, a fantastic sequence where Elena ends up fighting. There's a butler named Farouk. I'm not exactly sure how to pronounce it. I don't think they ever say his name. And I don't think he ever speaks throughout the entire movie. But Elena's fighting this butler. Zorro gets to the train. Zorro is fighting Armand. There was a point where Zorro, riding Tornado, jumps on top of the train. And then there's a tunnel that the train is going under. That old trope that they use in almost every Western. And then Tornado starts to run away from the tunnel on top of the train. And then there's a car that they get to that has like a wooden top instead of a metal top. So Tornado crashes through the wooden top, and now he's inside of the train. To do it just in time before the horse and Zorro are killed by the tunnel. And then everybody's fighting on the train. And these are some fantastic action sequences. There is some campiness, but it's still very enjoyable. And it's hard to describe. It's just a lot to look at and a lot to be excited about. But they're all fighting on this. They're fighting inside of the train. They're fighting outside of the train. Zorro is doing a bunch of flips and parkour while he's on the train. Elena is fighting this very deadly butler. and she's fighting without a sword for the most part. So just using whatever tool she can to fight this dude. Eventually, she's able to grab a bottle of wine with nitroglycerin in it, and the wine is transported on this huge contraption that's basically designed to keep the bottles from banging into each other. It's a bunch of springs. It's a very clever device to transport wine bottles of nitroglycerin and transporting in such a way that the bottles don't crash into each other. So she grabs one of these bottles, and at some point she's able to jam it into the butler's clothes, and she kicks him out the train. And right as the train was passing these Southern generals, and so when the butler falls down, he falls on top of the bottle. The bottle blows up everybody. It blows up the butler and all the troops that were gathered around to receive the explosive, the nitroglycerin, and the train fast forwards past them. After the fight, Elena is able to get Jaquin off. Well, she doesn't get him off of the train, but she puts him on a car, and she releases that car from the rest of the train. And it's the same car that Tornado happens to be on. Tornado was just kind of chilling. But Jaquin is rambunctious. He doesn't want to be left out of the action. He doesn't want to go to safety. So he gets on Tornado and he rides back toward the train where his mother is. But he somehow ends up ahead of the train. And the train, he notices, is going towards the signing of California into statehood. And the governor is there. The president of the United States is there. And they're on the train tracks signing this declaration or the statehood papers or whatever, having this ceremony, having the signing ceremony. I don't know why they're doing it on the train tracks, but that's what they've decided to do instead of doing it in the city. And the train that has the nitroglycerin is headed towards this ceremony on the train track. And Jaquin sees this. So he heads down to the crowd, and the crowd sees the train. The crowd starts scattering, but of course this is nitroglycerin, so not even sure if they can get away fast enough before they're killed by the massive explosion of all this nitroglycerin. But Alejandro sees that there's right where they're doing the signing ceremony, there's conveniently a place where the tracks can be diverted. Like, so you're going, the train can either go straight or it can be diverted away from the crowd. And what's weird is apparently he's the only person that can see this, the track diversion. Like, all those people are at the signing ceremony and nobody notices that they can divert this train coming towards them. So he goes down in Tornado, and he tries to work the mechanism to divert the tracks, but he's not strong enough. And Tornado rears up and stomps down, and Tornado's able to work the mechanism to change the train track and divert the train away from the crowd. And the crowd is saved by Jaquin and Tornado because Jaquin can't stay away from the action. And then still there is Zorro and Elena fighting Armand, and Armand eventually gets kind of like hooked up. Like, Zorro is able to fasten him to the very front of the train. He basically hooks him to the front of the train, and Armand couldn't get himself loose. And he uses his whip, which apparently he had the whole time, to get him and Elena off the train. There's an overhanging pole. He's able to whip the pole, and Zorro and Elena swings off the train, and the train slams into a dead end. There's a massive explosion. The day is saved. Elena and Alejandro make up. Later on, they remarry, and Alejandro apologizes to Jaquin for keeping a secret, because he realizes Zorro should be a family secret. It's not something that he should have kept from his son. So it was a quaint movie. And I enjoyed the action and the humor in this movie. It's not as good. I will concede that it's not as good as the first movie, but at the same time, I don't think it should be rated as low as it was. It's like, it doesn't receive hate, I don't think, but there seems to be a lot of disdain for this movie, and I think that it is unfairly disdained. It had the action and the humor and the adventure that I enjoyed. I guess there were some story elements that could have been ironed out a little bit better, perhaps. But it is what it is. And now that we've talked about our favorite parts, let's get into the trivia top 10. So I get most of my trivia from IMDb, but it's not 100% correct all of the time. I'm not exactly sure where IMDb gets the information that it gets. I'm pretty sure that there's there are sources listed on the website. I haven't investigated the sources. And sometimes it's not 100% accurate. And where I know that it's not accurate, I'll try to point it out. And in the case of this, the pieces of trivia that I've chosen this time, I did find some pieces of trivia that I have qualms with. So on to the trivia. Adrian Alonso Jacquin did not know English, so he learned his line phonetically, just as Antonio Banderas did for the Mambo Kings from 1992. So that's the thing that Alonso had to overcome. He didn't know English, and that's amazing. And he must have been an accomplished actor for them to choose him, being so young and not knowing English. And he was really good. Like, when you watch the movie, you'd never know that he doesn't know English. That was what was amazing about his acting. And just being like that annoying little kid, he's very good at that. And so playing his character and then playing and speaking English convincingly, these are all fantastic things. The locomotive used on the train at the end of the movie was not actually capable of moving under its own power. The illusion of it pulling the train was created by alternately using an out-of-vision diesel locomotive to pull or push a blue screen setup next to the steam locomotive with passing scenery added later, or an about 1/8 scale operable model of the train. It's good problem solving. Good problem solving. Yeah. Using fake scenery or using a scale model. I loved how they solved those problems. The movie went through many titles. It was originally called The Mask of Zorro 2, and then that title was changed to Zorro Unmasked, which had been the original script title by Ted Elliott and Terry Rossio. After their script was not used, the title went to Zorro 2, and then to The Return of Zorro, before Sony Pictures finally settled on the title The Legend of Zorro, which I like that title. I thought it was a really good title. There are so many Zorro movies, and I don't think any of them were called The Legend of Zorro, so that seemed to be appropriate. Between The Mask of Zorro and this movie, Zorro changed his name from Alejandro Murrieta to Alejandro de la Vega. Not only is de la Vega a respectable surname, which would make it easier to enter high society, but Murrieta was a wanted criminal, so using that name would be counterproductive. But the thing is, he already had an alias. In the previous movie, he went undercover as Don Alejandro Castillo y Garcia. And I think the only people who knew that he was Zorro or that he was Murrieta, I think they all died, right? They all perished. And so it seemed to me that this was the alias he could have continued to use in the new movie. I think that the real reason why they changed it to De La Vega, as I mentioned earlier, is they wanted to continue that legacy. Because when I first saw it, it seemed to me that, he's taking on the name of his wife. Because after his wife, or after Elena had found out that she was kidnapped as a baby, it seemed to me that she probably adopted De La Vega as her name. She wanted to honor her natural father. So to honor Don De La Vega, she assumed his name and she became Elena De La Vega. And then Alejandro, after they got married, he just took his wife's name. That seems the theatrical scenario. That seems like that would have worked. Although it would have been somewhat emasculating to take your wife's name. It's not something that was done in the 1800s. It was exceedingly rare. Even today, it's rare for a man to take his wife's name. I'm just saying that I think that they should have stuck with the identity that he assumed in the previous film to preserve the continuity. So I'm going to pour one out to Don Alejandro Castillo y Garcia. I guess that name is dead. Alejandro Vega had been the name of the original Zorro Diego Vega's father in the first era Zorro story by Johnston McCulley, The Curse of Capistrano, which was the source material for The Mark of Zorro for 1920. So that's cool. That's another reason I think that they went with Alejandro de la Vega, to honor to draw a connection between the first story that was ever written by or about Zorro and this film, to continue the legacy and legend of Zorro. And that makes sense from a narrative perspective. Contrary to false claims, Antonio Banderas is not the first Spanish actor to portray Zorro. Spanish actor Jose Suarez portrayed Zorro several decades earlier in Lawless Mountain, 1953, who was followed by another Spanish actor, Carlos Quinley, in Zorro's Latest Adventure from 1969, Zorro Rider of Vengeance, 1971, and Zorro the Invincible, also in 1971. And then here's where I have qualms with what is written in IMDb. According to IMDb, Banderas is also not the first Latino actor to portray Zorro. He was preceded by other Latinos such as Rafael Bertrand from 1964, Rodolfo de Anda from 1976, and Henry Darrow from 1980s. The problem with this is that Antonio Banderas is Spaniard. He's from Spain. He's Spanish. It's like he's from Europe. Antonio Banderas is European. Europeans aren't usually considered Latinos. That's not how you would describe them. Latino is exclusively used to address Spanish-speaking people in America, this side of the Atlantic. They're not used to describe people from Spain or Spanish people or Spanish-speaking people in Europe. So that's where I have qualms with what's written here in IMDb. It doesn't make any sense to write that, since Antonio Banderas is not Latino. He's Spaniard. So he's not the first Latino actor to portray Zorro because Banderas is not Latino, even though he plays Latino in the movie. So maybe that's where the confusion is. Not counting the films made from multiple episodes of a TV series, this is the second actual sequel to an English language Zorro film, as well as the second film where Zorro is played by the same actor. The first was Don Q, Son of Zorro from 1925, where Douglas Fairbanks reprises his role from the original The Mark of Zorro from 1920. When Don Alejandro de la Vega and Count Armand play Polo, the game essentially turns to a jousting match. I had mentioned this earlier. It's one of my favorite parts. Sewell played Count Adhamir, a professional jouster in A Knight's Tale in 2001. In both movies, he turns what should be a blunt object into a sharp one in an attempt to cheat and win the match. So it's interesting. It's like the spirits of Count Adhamir had come into Count Armand, and they used the same tactic. They made a sharp instrument in order to impale their adversary while they were supposed to be jousting for fun and not trying to fight for real. While it is unclear if the film was made with a PG or PG-13 rating in mind, director Martin Campbell reveals in the audio commentary that the MPAA demanded certain edits and reshoots in order to achieve the former rating. A notable example being the death of the Pinkerton agents. They were originally meant to be hanging off of meat hooks, but it was reshot a few months after principal photography wrapped in order to appear less graphic. That being said, despite the MPAA giving the film a PG rating, the film still includes intense moments of action and violence, most notably McGibbon's death. And they don't actually show it on films, but they don't show it clearly. Like, they don't show his head exploding, but you see him exploding in the background. I guess that's a little bit intense. And the scene where they had changed the death of the Pinkerton agents, they didn't have them hanging on meat hooks, but Armand opens the door and you see them lying on the floor, and they're obviously dead. And I guess there's enough evidence to show that they've been stabbed. So less graphic than hanging on meat hooks. The last bit of trivia: despite being a swordsman, Zorro doesn't kill anybody with his sword during the film. And I don't think he killed anybody in the last film. When Zorro fights, he is fighting to humiliate his opponents. He rarely stabs him in the heart. And he's using the type of sword where stabbing is what the sword was made for. It's a long, sharp sword, very pointy at the tip. It's made for impaling people. But Zorro rarely does that. Usually they die by other means. They are exploded. They are tied to a train and rammed into rocks. They get hundreds and hundreds of pounds of gold bars dumped on them, or they'll fall to their death, but they're rarely stabbed, or they're never stabbed. I think Zorro should start stabbing people. That's my take. And that's it for the trivia. Let's talk about what the critics thought. This is so much lower than I expected. The critics gave it a 27%. The audience score was 47% on Rotten Tomatoes, and IMDb Reviews has a more respectable 6.0. Mike Massey from Gone with the Twins wrote, "This faithful sequel's major fault just might be that it's so similar to the predecessor that it fails to stand out. But as it's transpiring, it's quite enjoyable." You know what? I also find this quite enjoyable. And I don't know, I think while the broad strokes of the story might be similar, I guess similar in the sense that it's like similar action, similar antics, although the elements are a little bit campier. I'm not sure if I should say that it's too similar to its predecessor. I'm not exactly sure what they would do different, because, Zorro it's like he looks like Zorro when he's fighting. It's like, I'm not exactly sure what they could have done different with the action or the story to make it stand out different from any more than it did. Because in this movie he has a son and his wife is fighting with, the bad guys. So I'm not exactly sure what they could have done differently. Maybe they could have introduced pirates like in the original script. Cole Smithy from colesmithy.com wrote, Catherine Zeta-Jones' eminent allure, Antonio Banderas' leading man charm are reduced to mere furnishings for an ostensibly child-friendly adventure movie filled with tedious stunt sequences, endless swords fights, and too many brutal murders. I don't know if I would agree with this. I will say that some of the fight sequences do kind of linger a little bit. Maybe they could have used more tension. I'm not exactly sure, but I'm not entirely angry at this review. Joshua Stearns from comingsoon.net wrote, The Legend of Zorro is a campier sequel, occasionally given too much to childish antics. But once the story kicks in, it transforms into a fine adventure film and a worthy addition to the Zorro film legacy. And I agree. I kind of noticed the campiness. I talked about it many times as I talked about this movie. And I really do like the story. So I am in agreement, largely. At last, Cheryl Michelle Fetters from MovieFreak.com wrote, That opening, alas, is the only time The Legend of Zorro hits and keeps its stride. Campbell moves the picture in fits and starts, elongating scenes we'd rather see cut and short and ending others before they even have a chance to develop. There might be some truth to that. I'm not going to lie, that I can see why somebody would say that. Finally, The Legend of Zorro is, as of this recording, available on Amazon Prime. Next episode, I'll be doing something completely different, almost jarring. I don't normally talk about films that I hadn't seen because I want to evoke an element of nostalgia when I talk about movies. But the next movie, I have a lot of nostalgia for, even though I never got a chance to see it. Join me next time, and I'll explain why. This is when we check out The Secret of Nim. You can follow us on Blue Sky, Threads, TikTok, Instagram, and sometimes Twitter at Backlick Cinema. Please contact us with any questions, comments, or suggestions at friends@backlickcinema.com. Please rate and review on your favorite podcast app. And if you're listening on YouTube, please like or subscribe or leave a comment below. I'd love to hear from you. One last time, if you like the show, then please help us grow by spreading out the word about Backlick Cinema, the podcast. Believe me, it matters. I've been Zoe Richardson. Be safe, share a movie from yesteryear with your family, hug your loved ones, and if you're going to be anything, be outstanding.